Thank you so much for watching this online video tutorial. Like, comment, and share, as well as subscribe to our channel at Good Better Best Online Videos for more video content. Alright, grade 9th, welcome again. Natural science. We looked at and gave a little brief introduction last week of the human reproduction. Okay, so we didn't just look at the system, but we just looked at what human reproduction actually is, find out that that's what we were made to do. We did touch on the reproductive system, though the human reproductive system, but we basically went through again, and we're just going to do a quick little recap of the purpose and puberty of reproduction. Okay, and we looked at all the different components, of course, of a male and female reproductive systems, as they are different. Okay, and we looked at how hormones change and how hormones affect puberty and in our bodies as different individuals, so male and female. And we looked at obviously the sex hormones for males are testosterone, while for females are estrogen. Okay, then we had a look at the reproductive organs. Right, we looked at the male system, okay, which is found mostly outside of the body, whereas the female system is found mostly inside of the body, and we'll have a quick little squiz on those as well in a quick little picture form. And then we also looked at the stages of reproduction, okay, and we touched on ovulation and changes to the uterus, and mentioned a little bit about menstruation. And we're going to get in touch with menstruation today, copulation, and also have a look at fertilization as well. Okay, so lots of theory that we're going to get through and lots of notes. Okay, so we're going to start off with stages of reproduction. Okay, cool. So to make things a little easier, so this is what we looked at, of course, the reproductive system of male and female. We obviously looked at the different components, so we'll run through a little bit. This one is a little bit more in detail. All right, so of the male and female reproductive system, of course, we have the penis of a male, the vagina of a female. Okay, and obviously we have the testicle and with the urethra here, all right, that runs all the way down to the prostate, right, which is attached to the seminal vesicle, right, with the bladder being in the middle, of course, right, which is in your urine. All right, so this one hasn't identified the bladder, okay, but the bladder is this little space here, okay, which is attached here to the seminal vesicle, which is attached to the prostate, okay, and the urethra, all right, which we see over here, this little valve here. And obviously we have tissue around as well, but most important parts here that we need to focus on is of course the what's the word I'm looking for? Let's look at my little gland here. There's a prostate here, the prostate gland, very important. The bladder, the seminal vesicle. Okay, these little pipes here is vas deferens, which is the sperm duct of a male. Okay, of course we have the testicle, both the testes. Okay, and of course the scrotum, where everything is found. Then for the female, we have the uterus, the fallopian tube. Okay, and the ovarian ligament, okay, and the ovary itself, the cervix, and of course the vagina opening, one of the most important parts, okay, that we need to focus on for the human reproductive system. Okay, now the male system isn't as intricate, of course, the female is more. Okay, so we obviously know with stages of reproduction, females, obviously they have the ability to bear children. All right, so having a baby, all right, it's a rare event in the life of a woman, as we introduced, but the body prepares itself of a female. The female body prepares itself to hold a baby or to carry a baby. Okay, so what the body does automatically, it automatically prepares the female's body uh, in case in case the female is carrying a baby, even if she's not, but the body just gets prepared for it. That's the female's body is just designed for that purpose. It's just designed for that purpose. So of course we know we have the first stage. Let's come over here, which is ovulation. Okay, first stage being ovulation. Okay, and ovulation is a process. Okay, the first thing, obviously, that is when an egg is released from the ovaries. So an egg is now released from the ovary, which you already saw in the little picture. All right, and obviously ovary, that's where the eggs develop. It's a small little bubble-like structure. Once a month, one of the ovaries starts growing an egg, and then it allows and then eventually becomes, it eventually bulges from the ovary, and then it obviously gets released. It gets released. In other words, the ovary almost bursts open, and then the egg gets released, and then it obviously goes down the oviduct, right, or the ovarian. Let's go back to that image quickly. Where's it? The ovarian ligament almost. Right, it goes down the ovary duct. Okay, all along into the fallopian tube. Of course, sorry, not the ovarian ligament. Obviously goes down into the fallopian tube. Okay, messed up my words there. Okay, awesome. Then it moves slowly to the uterus, and a human egg. All right, a human egg. Is about less than 1 millimeter wide, so it's very small. So it's about the size of this little period, right? It's about the size of that little period, or maybe even a little smaller than this little full stop on the page. Okay, so a human egg is very, very small. Okay. Now, obviously, when this happens under ovulation, there's obviously some changes to the uterus. That takes place. Okay, let's see if we can fit them in here. So obviously the uterus prepares itself for the arrival of the egg in case it has been fertilized. Okay, so prepares itself. That's something we can put there. The uterus prepares itself in case egg has been fertilized. Awesome. During the week following possible fertilization, so remember the body prepares itself as if, okay? Doesn't mean that it's going to happen, all right? As if the lining of the uterus, it starts to grow thicker with tissue containing glands and many blood vessels. Okay. So we're going to add that in here. The lining of the uterus grows with glands. So the glands start to swell up and blood vessels. Why do they do so? It's really to protect and feed the fertilized egg should one arrive. Now, often, obviously, if a woman is not falling pregnant, the egg is just unfertilized, of course, and then we're going to see what obviously just happens there. So an unfertilized egg would majority of the time just be present. Okay, cool. Right, next thing I said we're going to touch on was menstruation. Okay, so let's just get a color quickly, which is obviously now the term that is given. Just make sure I'm spelling it right. Menstruation, there we go, I'm spelling it right. Okay. Now, if fertilization has not happened in the oviduct, the lining of the uterus is not needed. Okay. So, if no fertilization Okay. Then, of course, the lining in the uterus is not needed. Now, what happens then? Then, about 14 days after ovulation, the thick lining that has developed in the uterus starts to break down. Okay? So, after about 14 days, it's about 2 weeks, after about 14 days, okay, of ovulation, okay, so after 14 days, after the ovulation period, okay, the lining breaks down. Okay, all the vessels and the glands and the lining, which obviously contributes to the lining, starts to break away, breaks down. Okay, the useless vessels and glands or dead cells, they pass out the human or the female's or the woman's body. Okay, so this passes out of the body. Okay, and where does it pass out? Obviously passes out through the woman's vagina. Cool. That's where it passes out. And that period is obviously known as menstruation, or otherwise known as a period. Okay? Period of time. Okay, where an event happens, so it just gets given the name period. Okay. Now, with a period, okay, there is a bleeding process, or what is a brackets a bleeding process. It's more like just useless blood passing out the body. Okay, the bleeding process that goes on for several days. It goes on for like several days until the extra lining to the uterus has been lost. So that just goes on for about several days. I think with some people may vary. Might not go on for several, might go on for a little less, or maybe a bit more. Okay. And then, of course, there's a menstruation or period. Okay, so once that period is finished, okay, so when the period is now finished, right, the uterus starts to build a new lining. Okay, starts to build a new lining in case the next egg gets fertilized. Okay, so the woman's body is constantly preparing for fertilization or for a fertilized egg to arrive in the uterus. Okay, it's constantly doing that. Okay, so that's why it has to, it's almost like it can't sleep on this process. It has to rebuild itself. All right, just in case a fertilized egg does arrive, it wants to be prepared. So the next ovulation happens about 14 days after the start of the period, by which time the uterus lining is ready again. Okay, so this process, like it happened or like it started first, restarts itself from the beginning again. So the whole cycle, therefore, definitely takes 28 days for a complete cycle to finish. Okay, let's read that again. Let's have a look at that again. So obviously once menstruation's finished, the uterus will start to build a new lining. All right, in case the next egg gets fertilized. The next ovulation period happens about 14 days after the start of the period, by which time the uterus lining is ready again to receive a new fertilized egg. Okay, so the whole process takes about 28 days. That's why you get a monthly period. Or a woman gets a monthly period. Okay, so I hope that makes sense around menstruation, and hope now we understand the process. I think any males watching this or in attention or attentive to this now surely does understand why the process happens. All right, it's not just a cleaning out process as everybody just thought it was. No, a female's body is preparing for the arrival of a fertilized egg in case, obviously, it's going to develop into a fetus, etc., etc. Okay. Cool, there we go. So, we have looked at the menstrual cycle and what happens in a large part of a woman's life on a monthly basis. Let's look at what happens if a fertilized egg reaches the uterus instead of an unfertilized one. Okay, so in other words, a fertilized egg now, obviously, a male's sperm cell has entered the egg and has begun fertilization. Okay, now it's reached the uterus. Fertilization of the egg requires, obviously, what I mentioned, sperm. Okay, in the woman's reproductive organs. Okay, so we get a fertilized egg, all right, as a result of the word that's given. I'll just put this word down: intercourse. Okay, which is obviously the same as sexual intercourse, of course. Okay, so humans, we call it sexual intercourse, but the word copulation, all right, this is obviously found or taken from in animals. Okay, so animals will never say that animals are having, or a horse or a whatever is pregnant because as a result of sexual intercourse. We would say it is as a result of the colloquial term mating, but the real term, or I would say the natural science term for it, is copulation. Okay, now there's a couple of things that we do need to obviously explain here. It's going to get quite graphic, so I need to warn you. Okay, just try and keep your brain as clear and as stable as possible. Of course, during sexual intercourse, we have obviously the man obviously gets what obviously is called an erection. All right, and an erection is caused not by anything else, but by the simple act of blood, all right, rushing to the penis. Okay, so it fills with blood. The tissue fills with blood under pressure. Okay, for a man. All right, so obviously we understand the next process. Okay, the erect penis is placed into the female or woman's vagina. All right, and that would obviously cause, all right, sperm from the man to mix with the liquid in the woman's vagina, of course. Okay, and obviously now what is happening during intercourse? Okay, the man also sexual reproductive organ makes a liquid that is called semen. Okay, which is basically a liquid in the sperm duct, okay, or basically a liquid that allows the sperm to flow. All right, otherwise how's it going to get there? Okay, the muscles of the penis obviously contract, all right, and then the semen will be forced out. Okay, when the semen flows out, all right, which is obviously filled with sperm, all right, with millions of sperm cells. Okay, and that's another term that when it flows out, that is obviously, I'm sure we've all read it, I'm sure we may or may not know it, but it flows out, and obviously that term is called ejaculation. Okay, and then after that, the sperm obviously swim up the uterus and into the oviduct, and then when they will begin, of course, the fertilization process, which we're going to have a look at in just a moment. Okay, so I'm going to need a new page, and let's have a look here at fertilization. Okay, so now obviously now the sperm have now entered the uterus. Okay, and what fertilization is, basically, simply put, is the joining of the sperm and egg to make one cell. Okay, so a man's reproductive or man's let's rather call it product of sexual intercourse, which is his sperm being released, and a woman's product of sexual intercourse, which is her egg being released in an ovary, of course, coming together to fertilize or come together to join, and out of that, a new life is formed. Okay, and that one cell is called a zygote. Okay, which you've seen before. Okay, if you haven't seen one, I'll show you one quickly. So I don't know if we can see this little image here of sperm cells that are rushing to fertilize the little egg in the middle. And we see one here looks like it's basically entering for fertilization to take place. Okay, that's how it basically looks. Okay, an egg can only be fertilized successful in the oviduct. So we must know that an egg can only be fertilized, right? It can only be fertilized successfully in the oviduct. Okay. If there's no egg in the oviduct, the sperm will die within 2 to 3 days. Okay. So there's no egg in the oviduct, sperm will die. Okay. In 2 to 3 days. Therefore, an egg can only be fertilized if the sexual intercourse happens about 2 to 3 days before the ovulation process. Okay. Or about 2 to 3 days after. Okay. So that's a specific time when an egg can and can't be fertilized. Okay. So these little what egg-like or lookalikes in terms of shape here, what they look like, they are actually they are cells. They're just cells around the egg itself. Okay, and the egg is actually this little thing over here, a circular, which looks like a oversized full stop at the moment. Okay, it's this little circular feature over here, and what we see here would be the sperm is obviously entering the egg itself. This little opening here, this one obviously is entering. Okay, and when it enters, obviously, and it gets to the little middle here, obviously then they will start to fertilize. The cells will merge with each other, and that's how the fertilization process will begin. And of course, then after that, there is something called implantation. Okay, so let's have a look at implantation. Implantation. So now after the egg has been fertilized, it needs to go somewhere, of course. Okay, so let's have a look at where it goes. Okay, so after fertilization, the zygote cell starts dividing as it is carried down the oviduct. All right, so that's after fertilization. The zygote cells, okay, they start dividing as they move down the oviduct. By the time it reaches the uterus, it is a little ball of cells, which is hollow in the center. Okay, so by the time it reaches the uterus, it is a little ball of cells. Right, little ball of cells, hollow in the center, and then basically, with it being hollow in the center, okay, it has a new name now, which is called an embryo. Okay, E-M-B-R-Y-O, embryo. The embryo will then sink into the thick lining that the uterus has prepared. Okay. That little process is called implantation. So that thick lining that thick lining that basically the uterus goes through every single month on a woman's monthly basis, called period or menstruation process. Okay, once the cell is fertilized and has become a embryo, then it basically, once it moves down to the uterus, that is called implantation. Okay, so the embryo, I wouldn't say moves down, but rather let's use the term sinks into the thick lining that the uterus has prepared. Awesome. Fantastic. And once this happens, there's a new term that now gets used, all right, which is now the woman is now pregnant. Okay, the embryo cannot survive unless it is firmly implanted, right? And from now on, it will get all it needs to live on from the mother's blood. Okay, everything it needs to live on will happen from the mother's blood. It will get from the mother's blood, of course. And that's why with the menstruation process, we looked at all the blood vessels and all the glands and stuff that was all there for the egg. So the embryo, obviously, which is obviously very, 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 very underdeveloped, small baby, all right, or new life. Obviously, now it's ready for development. It's ready to develop and to almost metamorphosize. All right, if we have a look at what happens with the frog, we call that metamorphosis, just using the likeness there of that it's now ready to change, all right, to become change or develop into a fetus. All right, obviously you can start seeing more human-like structures appearing. Let's look at the role of the placenta. Okay, so now everything is a process here. Okay, it's all in stages. So once the embryo has or is implanted, it obviously starts to grow. It's feeding, right, on the nutrients in the blood of the mother. During the next few weeks, it grows into something that is clearly a human. Okay, so after the embryo grows, okay, grows and becomes a fetus. Now take note of the spelling here, F-O-E-T-U-S. Okay, it grows into a fetus, which is basically a clear sign that it's a human being. Okay, to keep alive, and this is quite intuitive, okay, to keep alive, the fetus needs food and oxygen. Okay, so it needs food and oxygen, because now it's going to start breathing. Okay, it needs food and it needs oxygen, and it needs to get rid of also its wastes. Okay, because it's a proper human. All right, even though it's a small one, extremely small, you know, it's less to get rid of waste. Right, it's a normal body function. Okay. And its body still functions as a human being that is not inside another human being, if I can put it that way. It is attached to the uterus wall of the mother, all right, by an umbilical cord. I always struggle to say that word sometimes. Okay, it is attached to the uterus wall, right, of the mother by a very flexible umbilical cord. All right, and now the umbilical cord that runs into a place, or runs to a place that is called the placenta. Okay, now the placenta is firmly attached, okay, is firmly, let me just get this wording, attached to the uterus wall. very firmly attached to the wall of the uterus. Okay, now this anchors the developing baby in mother's tissues. Okay, I know I've said this word a lot lately, but blood from the fetus goes into the placenta, where it is very close to the mother's inner uterus. When I say to the mother's blood. Okay, although they are kept very separate. Okay, they are kept very, very, very separate. Okay, the substances such as food and oxygen, they travel down the umbilical cord. All right, and they go down to the fetus. All right, and then the fetus also ingests waste from itself, and where would it pass that down? It will pass that down through the umbilical cord as well, and it will pass that into the mother's blood. But it won't deposit it into the bloodstream, but rather the blood that is found in the placenta. Okay. So, for purpose of the recording, just showing a graphical image here of a human being placenta. You see, it's filled with blood, all right, and waste of the fetus. Okay. So obviously, and there's the umbilical cord that's attached to it, which obviously must be cut off from the baby is now being born into the world. It's now out of the mother's womb. So that's just a little image I thought I'd show you of the placenta itself. All right, the last process now is gestation, coming out of the roll of the placenta, which obviously is to anchor the fetus and provide it with what it needs to survive, develop into a baby. Okay, gestation is the time that the baby is developing in the mother's womb. So it's a time word. Okay, the word refers to a time. Okay, the time that the baby is developing. Let me fix that word up. Developing in the mother's womb. Okay, cool. In the first 3 months, the fetus develops all its organs. Okay, so let's have a look. In 3 months, okay, obviously the fetus develops organs. Okay, that's in the first 3 months, and then after that, it grows in size. Okay, also besides organs, also develops fingers and toes. Okay, they obviously will be very tiny. Okay, after that, it will develop size. Okay, so it then grows all those in size. All right, it grows all those in size, and the organs develop so that the baby can obviously survive outside of the mother's uterus when it is born. Okay, how long is the gestation period for humans? 40 weeks. Okay, it's about 40 weeks. Now, if we take that into consideration, that is usually about, obviously that's 9 months. Okay, it's usually about 40 weeks, and some months sometimes have 5 weeks, so works out perfectly, right? Some usually say 36 weeks, but sometimes, for depending on the female, of course, because everybody's different, sometimes more than 36 weeks, up until 40 weeks for proper development of the fetus into a newborn baby. Of course, some fetuses do develop a lot quicker, all right? Or they use the term in inverted commas, pop quicker. In other words, they pop out of their mother's tummies a little bit quicker, sometimes in 30 weeks, 32 weeks, or somewhere around there. Okay, and then obviously we have upped our medical advances in the world today to ensure human life, so there obviously are incubators, which is basically like machines to help the baby still with their development. Therefore, the fetus is fully formed after 40 weeks, all right, after 36 to 40 weeks, okay, and is ready to be born 9 months after the fertilization took place. Okay, 9 months later is able to be born. So 9 months later, we all were born. All right, since we started developing. Okay, it's very awesome thing to think about. This little process of human reproduction. It's amazing how the bodies of us as humans just know what to do when it comes to creating life, and it does it so well without even second guessing itself or thinking of how to do it. It does it automatically. All right, so that brings us to the end of human reproduction. Okay, there are some questions that I'm going to get you guys to complete. For those in my class now, I'll send it in the WhatsApp group just for you guys to complete on your own. Okay, but that ends off this period, this little section of human reproduction. And that basically wraps it up. Grade 9s, thank you so much for joining me today on the stages of reproduction. And stay tuned for the next video where we'll look at the next topic.